Ticket with the programming. I'm Chase Ingram.
I'm Captain America.
And along with me is Bill Grundler.
Wolverine.
I don't have a soundbite for you yet, Halpin, but
what does that make me? The
It should be like computer sounds.
A nerdy scientist that
what's the the intro song to the movie Nerds?
Perfect.
Wouldn't that be Devo? I think probably made up that one, didn't they?
Or like an R2D2 noise. That's what it should be.
Oh, there we go.
That would be cool.
It's
computer
it's
talking.
done. Yeah. But I like how we're just like stereotyping the shit out of you, and you did all the legwork. And you're a special guest on the show.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
It's only gonna double down once the spreadsheet gets open. So yeah.
Hey, back-to-back episodes. Yesterday, Bill and I did our games movement event prediction show. If you guys didn't watch that, go back and listen to it. It's either on YouTube or you can look at any of our podcast channels there. We're going to sit down with Mr. Mike Halpin, the known and noble, or I would say known_noble is the Instagram handle that you have for all your amazing stats throughout the season. And we're going to talk some shop because the big topic coming out, well, one of the many big topics coming out recently is the cuts. Everybody's talking about the cuts that are going to be at the CrossFit Games. And the schedule is going to be after Friday, which is 2 days of competition because the individuals are starting on Thursday. After Friday, they're cutting the field to 30. And then after Saturday, a full day of competition, they'll cut to 20 for the last day. And the question I posed to Mike, like a lot of people have been asking, is I wonder what the games would have looked like last year if the same cut system were applied like it was this year. And, before we get into that fun stuff is, first off the bat, obviously cuts have been a long-standing part of the CrossFit Games since 2007. It hasn't happened every single year since 2007. I believe 7, 8 were no cuts, and then 9, 10, basically 9 through 14, there were cuts. 15, 16, 17, 18, no cuts. And then we went back to cuts, and we went to extreme cuts in 2019 and on. Last year probably being the fewest cuts we've had since 2018, which was just a cut to 30 after, what was it, a day or two of competition, and then they ran out the rest of the weekend. But, I'll start with you guys. Mike, I'll start with you since you're on the show.
Sure.
I guess the show is, as, you have a different perspective and you look through a different lens than maybe most people do when it comes to being a fan or an analyst of the CrossFit Games, and you have a unique perspective. What is your view on cuts as it pertains to maybe the overall competition itself?
Yeah, and I'm fairly newer to all of this. Like, I only got into CrossFit in like 2019 as far as watching it, and then 2020 really doing it, and then sort of took off from there. So I had a lot of homework to do, and Brian and I have a lot of good conversations. I pick his brain all the time. So cuts to me, as you said, 2018 was the last time that happened. 2018 was the last time there was no cuts. So they're fairly normal to me, but they've been obviously of a variety of different versions. So I don't really have that comparison beyond seeing the documentaries or going back and watching some of the events to say like, oh, okay, yeah, this would have been totally different if there was 40 athletes here, or if there was 100 and whatever athletes 2019, it wouldn't have worked. But in doing a lot of that homework, I even was going back and watching one of the documentaries today, the 2021 documentary. There is a scene where Dave lays out what the cuts are going to be, and they aren't what was in 2021.
Interesting.
So he actually had it where on Sunday, the cuts would have gone to 10 and 10 for the last two tests or events or whatever we want to call them these days. Versus
we don't say tests here. Sorry.
Yeah, this is safe event.
You get tests. I mean, Chase was there. You get tests said in your ear really loudly.
3 straight weeks.
It just, oh man. So I found that interesting is that I don't mind them, but they do need to, and I know a lot of our side conversations are going to go here, so I won't steal the show. They need to be done the right ways. They need to be done in the right orders and done at the right times. But if it's done for the reasons that Dave mentioned the other day, sure, I get some of those. I think there's a lot more that any athlete saying is like, no, put me on the field, let me do all of the events, and let me show out in especially if there's going to be events where they would have done better if they were there versus not.
Bill, when Mike was saying like there's other factors that go into basically how we perceive or judge the cuts. One of those huge things is the programming leading up to a cut. And what is it about the programming that is so basically vital to prove that this was indeed a good time?
Yeah. Right. Well, you have to remember what we're trying to accomplish with the CrossFit Games. With CrossFit, it's finding the fittest under our moniker of what fitness is, our definition of what fitness is. We can't just say because someone is fast and strong, they have to have all the elements. I mean, to be the champ, to be the fittest, you have to have all the elements. You have to be the best at all of the things. If you run a series of events and certain things haven't been tested, and then you cut the field, well, now what you're doing is you're essentially cutting people that may be able to showcase that could disrupt or even actually get themselves to the upper part of the leaderboard based on what's been shown. So if all you do is have endurance events up into a cut, and now you miss the strength, you miss any gymnastic, you miss some high intensity elements, then all of a sudden you're leveling the field with the wrong level of people. And I think that's wrong to do. So if cuts are going to happen, there is they can be done appropriately. I personally, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the cuts. I don't like them. We've already, can I give my opinion? Is that cool?
Yeah.
Do we have time for that?
Yeah.
What I see as we do,
Gary really asked me if you
I didn't
really wonder what you're going to say now.
I didn't want to circumvent some of the other things we're going to be talking about, but I feel that we've already had all of these qualification steps to get our group to the floor. Now we have our 40 people, and I'm not talking the teams necessarily and all that. I'm talking the individuals. We have all 40 there, so you should let them play in all of the events to get the true standard of all of the athletes in this particular event. I mean, now in the old days, we used to call the entire CrossFit Games was the test. There were all of these events in between there, but the whole thing was the test. So if we're talking the totality of the test, everyone should be involved and everyone should be on the line to do that. I think if you shorten it up, if you cut people out, I think it does a disservice to the overall test and to all the athletes that are there. However, I do see the cut as a tool to where you now can do different things logistically that you can't do with 40 people, where how many heats you have to do and all that kind of stuff. So I understand it, but I'm not a fan of it.
I think that's a more common feeling for a lot of fans.
Yeah, totally.
Or anyone across the board. I don't want to discredit like an analyst or a broadcaster or a podcaster or anyone. Like if you're not a fan, then you can't have a genuine opinion on how you personally feel. Personally, I love seeing an entire field take the totality of the test.
Yeah.
Right, from start to finish, all events across all days. I enjoy that as a fan. That's my personal opinion. When I see cuts at the same time, I'm a lot like you guys, where it's like, listen, as long as these things lined up before this cut and these things lined up for this cut, and we cut at the right time, it was an appropriate tested field to say you are no longer going to be a part of this competition moving forward. All right, fine. Right? Would I like to see all 40 like we saw 15 through 18? Yes. Oddly enough, those were some of the most popular years of the sport when we had entire fields of competition. But at the end of the day, it's the fittest on earth. It's the fittest man, woman, and team. We've said this before. That's their goal, not necessarily the fittest field. Though I like, from a personal perspective, knowing who was ranked 1 to 40 at the CrossFit Games. That took the whole test all weekend long. I think it's a cool thing to see on a personal level. I do like that. At the same time, whatever reasons you have for the cuts, and whether it's like you said, Bill, it's to spice up the programming later on, that may take too much time, effort, money, and equipment to run through a field of 40 like you do with 20. Okay, if that's your reason, fine. If you want to allude to other sports, I think CrossFit is still so different. You can't do an apples-to-apples comparison, but you can draw comparisons to things like that. I get it. But, at the end of the day, the big question I always have, and this is why I reached out to Mike, is it going to affect who wins the CrossFit Games? Is it going to affect who makes the podium? Is it going to affect the top 10 and now top 20 that we would end up over the course of the weekend. Those are the big questions and concerns I have when it comes to cuts, circling around. Did the programming work? Did we cut at the right time? Did we find the right people that at the end of the day were the fittest on earth?
Yes.
Over.
Thanks for coming, guys. It's been a great show.
I think, and part of this is you can have an emotional opinion about a certain things, but you can also have an objective opinion on how things shake out, right? And another reason why we talked to Mike, and look, the legwork that Mike put these tables together, which I'll show you guys here in a second, is the concerns are these cuts going to have a dramatic effect on how the competition unfolds, or just a dramatic effect on your feelings of watching the competition? And I think those could be two different things.
I agree with that. And I don't have the numbers that Mike has. I know as an athlete, it's like I already made it through the open, the quarters, the semis. I should be able to run all the stuff here, because it might come up that one of the events I'm going to be able to, I'll be the best in the world at it. And so let me knock Justin down a little bit or whatever. I mean, that's the discussion of that. However, there have been other types of cuts that have been in the games as well. Like if you have a minimum work requirement, if you don't finish that, then all of a sudden you're out of the games. If you did, like we had one time with the swim, if you didn't make the swim a certain distance, okay, well, you're done. You're out of the games. Not that you didn't finish in that event, you're out, no matter what was coming up next. And so we've seen some drastic cuts. We've seen cuts where, you touch a line and we're losing big names out of the CrossFit Games, and that changes the landscape, I think, drastically.
Yes.
And again, even in that year, right, that year specifically, it was, we talked a lot about when it was, but I think one of the things also in that one was the standard of the cut appropriate. It wasn't that people were not doing certain work, but it was like foot on the line type of thing where people were getting cut. And that there was a lot of dramatics that went into that particular cut, which allowed us to really kind of, pick apart the onion and look about, okay, not only did all of these things happen, not only did that one particular cut change the complete landscape of the games that year, but again, what is the purpose of it? And I think that just as when you're programming anything, any implement, any rep scheme, any particular weights, so you're looking for a certain amount of intensity or whatever, what is the reason for that? What's the why for that cut? Like, it can't just be, well, because these other people aren't good enough yet, or we're trying to find the fittest. Yeah, we already know those things. What's the reason? Like, there's got to be more of a reason than we just need a smaller field. I don't personally believe that that's an appropriate answer, unless it's like, okay, you're trying to do some large equipment logistic type things, unless that's the deal, which I get. If that's the case, I understand, but at least say it if that's gonna be the case.
Fair.
Yeah, and if you want to do 2 heats versus 4, or if you want to do, like, we're going to take all the athletes to this place and it's only going to be able to fit 10 lanes for something, and we want to do 20 lanes of chaos or something like that. Like, that sort of works, where you can say, and maybe today versus the days of the games, like, they don't want to, like, play all their cards yet and say, like, okay, well, we were expecting to do a 20 lane field to do something, and if we told any of the athletes beforehand, it would have just the cat's out of the bag. So we want to just have them all do it at once. Dave started to go into some of those. It was, like, interesting, like, especially since he's now ahead of all of the sport versus just the programming. I don't want to insult Dave, but versus what he was previously doing, now ahead of all the sport. Some of his language started to go to these other places where it was like, well, it's actually better for the vendor village if there's less heats and there's more time to spend in there for both the fans and the athletes. Or it's like better for the judges to get more time off and focus, and then be able to use certain judges for certain times or something like that. Or at least that's where I sort of heard him going. Like, those are good reasons, but those are reasons that it's sort of like, okay, but just have more time in between, or just have more judges. Or, obviously we can't just create something out of nothing, so they have to do what they have to do. But discounting athletes competing is a tough sale for the whole thing. If it's really that, if it's saying, like, just take the athletes off the field and we have less athletes on the field, then that solves it. Like, no, don't necessarily do that. Like, fit some time in somewhere to do the events the way you want to do them with the full field, or create those events towards the full field.
Or the other thing is, don't put a cut in the games. Make it at the semis. Don't bring as many
Yeah, there was
people
in there
from the
somewhere.
semis.
Yeah.
Like, why would we cut the field once we've gotten everybody there to do these things? And then it's like, okay, if you only want 20 people, okay, then figure out the best way to get the right 20 people there, because then it's going to be important through the semis to make sure that everyone's flip-floppy sled isn't sliding on a carpeted side and an uncarpeted side, and everyone's got all the right stuff that way.
Send everybody down one perfect lane,
right?
And then, do 20 heats of one perfect lane.
But but at least make sure that all your runners are all calibrated correctly, and et cetera, et cetera. But like, if you're going to do that, then you have everybody on the floor competing. I agree. I don't. One of the fun things about programming is you get to design the right test for your field. And if the test is always supposed to be, or the competition is supposed to be about the athletes are what make the event great, not what the event is. So I would hate to think that we're cutting athletes out so that we can have a spectacle of things, like they're going to do my giant killer cage thing and they can only have 20 people, so they need to cut half the field to do that. I would be bummed. I would be bummed as a fan, as a coach, as an athlete, if that was the case. I think there needs to be a more appropriate reason other than I need more space. I think make the cuts earlier, if that's the case.
Yeah, and then I mean, we talked programming cuts and things, but the other big thing is scoring.
Right.
It's funny is that we have analyzed the programming of every single CrossFit Games dating back to 2007. That was basically the baseline foundation of the show.
Yeah.
And we went 7 all the way through 22. We've analyzed every single one through every single event all the way through. But at the same time, we also, at the end of the analysis, is we brought in the scoring table used that year. And over the past 16 years, I'm not sure if we've had the same scoring table year in and year out.
No.
I don't, and not even when we kept like the same athletes. Maybe we did then, but is that we had points per place scoring for several years of the CrossFit Games. I want to say 7 through 10. That was the way we scored the CrossFit Games. And then 11, we may have brought in this points per place system. And then the system changed depending on the number of athletes that we had. But then we started having cuts and this system didn't change. And then we had cuts and the system did change. And scoring has, and we've seen, and we've shown this, a massive impact on who stands on the podium at the end of the weekend. I mean, how many times, Bill, did we look at, say, 2007 through 2010 is like, here's the podium, it is points per place. But, Chad Schroeder did all this information for us at the time was, here's the podium if we'd use traditional scoring.
Right.
And it changed. Here's the podium if we did average finish place, and it would change. And that's when you start to get a little worried that the cuts combined with multiple scoring systems throughout the weekend actually dictates who wins the competition, not the fittest person's performance.
Well, and you see the change, from having 40 people on the field to 30 to 20 to 10, whatever. And I think the intent is, to make the points equal from when you have a larger field to a smaller field. But you're right, it does change it. We've seen it affect it. I mean, it's funny. And I know that we haven't done it with the CrossFit Games, but we, especially in our thread group, in our text group, we have the Z Score champion, who's constantly looking. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter what event we're talking about. It could be Dubai, it could be Wadapalooza. His numbers are always, Tyler's numbers are always going up, and even that would change it. So it's like. It would be interesting to see, like, okay, if you use a Z-score that way, what if you do the Z-score as you make your cuts instead of making an entirely different scoring table for every single number of the field that you have.
And this goes to the comment is that it says change the scoring every time you cut. And it's like, that sounds like a good idea, but Mike, what problems does a changing scoring system with a changing field bring to the table?
Uh, you're gonna have athletes that are just always gonna be in the teens. They're always gonna finish behind 10 or 11 people, and then you're drastically changing what score they get for that. Like, I'd I'd rather keep it like 40, 30, 20 is what they're gonna use this year. They've already released.
Mhm.
It's funny what CrossFit puts articles out about. They won't, like, release, like, certain things, but all of a sudden we get an article about the scoring table. So nerd stuff is great for me. But, so they are gonna use a 40, 30, 20. Like, if they were just like, well, the score is 40, and if there's 36 athletes, which that's another piece of this is, like, a lot of this is built on all 40 athletes competing
Mhm.
until they're cut, then we're just going to keep giving the same scoring until we then do the cut. Like, with those cases, you're going to see pieces where, like, an athlete is just going to average out as like 15th, and they're just going to get different scoring each time they get 15th. That
Right, like that
it's
15th
not
place
consistent.
finish isn't the same
Yeah.
point system as you change the scoring table and you make cuts versus never changing the scoring table. But at the same time, is that your 15th place finish when there's a field of 40 is different than your 15th place finish in a field of 20.
Right.
Like, relative to the field that you're competing at. And that's where the challenge comes. It's not just as simple as we're making these cuts, we're changing the scores. Like, we just want to talk about is, like, there's a lot of implications and 1,000 different ways this thing can go. And one of the things that I don't exactly like when you change the scoring system as the cuts get greater and greater is that you put a different emphasis on the worth value of particular events later in the weekend.
Yep.
And that, again, skews things a bit in my mind when this is a performance-based competition, not a points-based competition, even though it ends up being a points-based competition based off your performance, but it's not directly associated with performance. And Bill, you mentioned Z-score a little bit ago, and that's really the point of Z-scoring is that it's a performance-based scoring system that has nothing to do with the number of people taking the test, but how people performed on the test. And something like that can actually get rid of a little bit of that, I would say, I don't know, controversy when it comes to scoring tables, because it's just based off performance alone relative to the field taking the test.
Yeah, and I like Z-score for a lot of reasons. One, you're hitting one of them. The other one is seeing athletes actually try throughout the entire weekend, because as we're going to see a cut down to 20, well, the same possibility, or at least it was there during the Rich and Matt years and Tia years, is, well, you have the other side where it's like she's beating everybody by 200 points. She's no longer actually trying to win this event. She's just, like, trying to do the minimum work requirement, or as the last documentary showed, she's just going to soak in the moment and finish 12th and just go about it. Like, Z-score or something that actually says, like, well, no, let's take what the athlete did on the field and then put that in and say, like, okay, that's worth 100, and then here's the gap down if they beat them by 2 minutes, versus just saying, like, well, it's 100 and it's 100 and it's 100 and it's 97 and it's 97 and it's 97. Like in that case, that those 3 points don't really matter, and it actually then proves out showing performance and being able to say, I am the fittest person here on this test, or sorry, event. Jeez. And oh my gosh.
Careful,
But,
you can have the switch right.
oh yeah. I'm the best person here, regardless of what we're going to call it. And I can show that out by actually hammering home this event and saying, yeah, I beat everybody and I beat them by a mile.
And again,
versus
just like
saying,
anything,
I played the game.
Yeah, there is no perfect system. There are pros and cons to everything. You can poke holes in Z-score as you can poke holes in points per place versus average finish place through the weekend, or designated points on a sliding scale versus an even scale. There's a lot of different ways and systems we have used over the past, but the thing I do like about Z-score is I feel like it's more in line with CrossFit itself. It's a performance training method, and it's a performance-based scoring system. Question was, and I don't want to dive into much of the weeds of what Z-score is because that's not what we're here for, but go listen to Tyler Watkins' episode with us that we did like a year ago. But all right, so go ahead, Mike, if you had anything else.
I was just gonna say it awards performance over the rest of the field is the biggest piece of Z-score. Instead of just saying every place is worth 3 points or 2 points or 1 point, it's saying that athlete's performance over the next athlete's performance is rewarded by X.
Yeah. I might be getting this wrong, but like essentially, if you win the event, you get 100 points, and then everyone's points is allocated based off their performance relative to yours.
Right.
So if
but Tyler's the king of that. So yeah,
and he's probably getting pissed off because I'm oversimplifying, which I am, but I was just trying to get as layman as possible. So okay, so let's do a little look back of what we're here for. We're going to take a look back at last year's CrossFit Games for 2022 using the cut system first that we have in place coming in 2023. The second thing we'll have is what the cuts would look like also using the scoring system for 2023, because this is a little bit different. And then the biggest one we did, and we talked about this with timing of events, programming events, but I think one thing we said but didn't say directly was when these events are placed throughout the weekend. And a big thing we saw last year was, say, the amazing performance early on of some athletes starting on Thursday last year at the CrossFit Games, and they slowly fell off towards the end of the weekend, versus athletes that started slow and climbed the leaderboard throughout the rest of the weekend. Example is, say, like Haley Adams versus Laura Horvath. Exactly. In a sense, right? Haley's or Mal O'Brien, right? Mal O'Brien started off super strong and then tailed off towards the end. Laura Horvath started very low and started like winning on Sunday to get herself onto the podium. Did that change if the events were in reverse is another thing we're going to look at, who makes the top 20, just to show how the event order, or as Bill, you talked about, when these cuts happen and what events are placed where, has a massive, or what impact that has on the CrossFit Games. Roger, what's up? Always here. Our OG from the Great White North.
That's right.
All right, before we get to that, because we always like to do this, our CrossFit Games edition OG shirts are available for pre-sale. It starts July 13th, which is today. It'll close July 17th because we got to get these things printed and ready and shipped before anyone makes the trip to Madison, Wisconsin with us over there at the start August. We have two styles. We got a lifestyle, which is not a slim cut. We also have an athletic cut. There's two different ones, different colors in each one. We've got a navy blue, a black for Bill, a red, and a white. And we have the writing on the back, which is the standard is the standard. And that is something that Nicole Carroll has been preaching to our community ever since she really took over the brand ambassador or controlling all of CrossFit's brand. I reached out to Nicole personally, and she signed off completely on this. So we are bringing it to you. The standard is the standard. That is on the back of the shirt. On the front, we do have a new OG logo, and that is a deck of cards, Pukey logo with the OG on the front. So go to theogculture.com. Order your shirt today. Get every color. Get one of your favorite colors. I leave that up to you who's watching. Again, we have it in navy blue, black, red, and white. The sale is from the 13th to the 17th. If you guys follow us on Patreon, you will get a 20% discount on this shirt. We are bringing a new discount code for you, so don't order it just yet. Stay and listen to the rest of the show. But our Games Edition tees are set and available. So, all right, Mike, let's go through what we have, and we'll start with just the basics, and it's the looking back on the field using the 2023 cuts. And what I thought was interesting here is, through all the drama and the assumptions and everything, is that you have the original order here on this tab, the new rank here on this tab. And as I look through it, is one of the big names was like, okay, who would have missed out on the top 20 last year on the men's side? And it only came down to one person. And it looked like that was Willie George, who ended up in 17th overall at the end of the weekend. What I thought was wild was that okay, one person missed out if they made these cuts last year. But beyond that, when I looked at the top 10, there was no difference in the top 10. It is the same 10 athletes except for BKG and Guimajeros.
Points.
And they were so close then, right? And they were separated by how much last year? They're separated by 10 points. They're separated by 10 points last year, where BKG was in 9th, Guimajeros is in 10th. With the new cut system, if they put in place, only changed by 11 points and a place finish.
That's crazy. Wow.
That's it.
So
I thought this was fascinating. And a lot of times we're like, what does this do? What does this do? It's like, it doesn't do much. One person missed out on the top 20. So 19 of the 20 remain the same. 10 of the top 10 are the same. And the only two order that changes in 9th and 10th. And that's by 10 or 11 points. Now, that's not to take out as the pride to have a top 10 finish or a top 20 finish to finish out the weekend and whatever money is associated with that. But when we're looking at this is going to change the entirety of the competition, not necessarily when we're looking at the men's side. Bill, you've seen this for the first time. What is your
I mean, I think, when you're up at the top, when you're looking at your top athletes are always going to rise. They're always going to be at the top. I mean, we've talked about like all the champions that we've had, like basically it doesn't matter what event you throw out there, they're going to be up towards the top somewhere. I'm shocked that the exact same 10 with one switch that's only like literally 10 points. Like that blows my mind. I would have thought there would have been a little bit more mix up than that. Even when you look all the way to the top 20, like there aren't as many as I thought that there would be as far as the shuffling going around on the men's side.
Yeah. It's pretty
shocking.
wild.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Mike, do you want to add anything before?
George's sort of falls like 6 places and down into 23rd is he doesn't get the chance because he was cut, and the way we sort of did this using the 23 cuts, he wouldn't have done back 9 and gotten 2nd place in that. So I don't remember at the games. I know this is different like every single time, like games, open, whatever else. Do they pay is only if you win an event, or is it if you top? Is it just winning an event, or do they even?
They did top 3 on that, didn't they?
It might be top 3.
Okay, so in that case, Willie George is out some money if he doesn't get to do that, because he was one of the, just to call it out, he was one of the top athletes. There's a couple other top performances that wouldn't have happened, which is an interesting piece of this. His 2nd place on back 9 is by far the largest. There's a few women that like they wouldn't be in the top like 5 or so, but his 2nd place. And then there's, just to lay it out, spoiler alert, no event wins change because these athletes weren't here. So that was interesting.
Right. And maybe the points either changed or squeezed a little bit, but other than shuffling, maybe a couple of the lower bottom 11 through 20, but nothing drastic on the men's side.
Right. Yeah.
All right, let's switch over to the women's side. Now this one, all right, you have the original rank on the left, obviously Tia Toomey in first, all the way down to 20th. The new score with the new cuts. Here's one, Bill. 1st through 12th, there is 0
change.
It is the same order, 1st through 12th. The biggest one after that is that Christy O'Connell, who had been 13th in the new cut format. Sorry, 13th in the original, would have been 18th with the new cuts, which tells me Christy had a bigger end of the weekend than she did, or what does that tell us, Mike?
She would have been 18th in the new. She had a bigger front end of the weekend.
Front end of the weekend.
Because then the scoring, I think, is what actually does it to her. It's like her finishes towards the back end, she's not being awarded as much.
Oh yeah, he says she has a 5-point differential and a 69-point difference with this new cut system.
So it just ekes into it. I don't want to like overwhelm anybody, but I might be able to share this in the future. And if you scroll all the way over, it actually will then show you like every single one of their finishes and where they were and how they did it. So with that, we could probably dig into it and find exactly where Christy got wronged by this new system. But yeah, it's likely that she was awarded
13th,
one side or the other.
4th, that was shuttled overhead. Oh gosh, she got 4th and 4th in that event. Damn.
Yeah, she was really good. There's a whole thing I'm looking on like those AB events that Boz seems to love, and the athletes that do really well in both. Brian and I have looked at that a few times.
Now we talked about last time is that the one athlete that was out of the top 20 with this new cut system, with a cut to 20 again, they had 30 all the way through. For the women's side is Karin Freyova, who was the 20th one. Coming
it's the same,
but 23rd with this new cut system where she wouldn't admit it. But look at this. I guess with the cuts, there's a more point differential because she wouldn't have finished the weekend. But Karin Freyova is the one athlete that would have been not making in the top 20 with this new cut system.
And for her, it's the same story as Willie George. She finished 3rd in Alpaca, or the version of Alpaca that they did. And which I heard your show yesterday. I also hope that there's another Alpaca event. But she finished 3rd in that event, so she didn't get to do that in this system where she would have been cut before it happened.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that's part of it, is that, the end of the weekend in 2022, and this is what we talked about, how programming matters before and after cuts, is that Sunday was heavy day, or heavy, strong athlete event, followed by a heavier, stronger athlete event, and then a big athlete to make a row cut and then finish the rest of the weekend if people wanted to push it in the last event, which that usually changes the way people attack it, whether they're in contention or not in contention. And that was the last day. Heavily favored a bigger, stronger athlete in 3.
Yeah, and then in this system, the cuts were, let me just remind myself. I know one of them's a sandbag event. And then the other one is Echo Press. So those, just to call it out, so those would be the 2 events. Yeah.
Now the Echo Press would have cut the field to 30, and the sandbag event would have cut the field to 20.
Yep. And then this is the second.
Get those tiebreakers right.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Event, right?
Holy shit, yeah.
I mean, what if you lost on a sandbag over the yoke tiebreaker?
Exactly.
I'd be furious. It's like I lifted the bag 2 minutes faster than that dude, and he gets to beat me because he can go over. Because I dropped.
What if you walk out onto the field and it's like, well, you got to lift this 200-pound sandbag event, but the next day you get to do kettlebells and running and sled pushing. So,
and just goes to talk about the importance of all the things that are associated with the cuts, the scoring, when the events are placed, and the programming of the events in general.
Yeah, but when we go to the one where we flip it, I just wanted to make that call out because it would be really interesting if these were the events that that suddenly were the ones to make or break somebody's weekend.
So not a lot of drama per se. If you're a fan of someone who gets cut, clearly it's going to be dramatic for you. But one person got displaced. The order for the top 10 only changed for the men on 9th and 10th, and that's it. On the women, it went all the way down in order to 12th. And some little changes at the bottom of the top 20, but not a whole lot. So if the first alarm is this is going to change everything, well, it's not necessarily going to. So we're always still at a wait and see. We have no idea what's going to happen at the games yet. None.
Right.
But
and then
back, it's like, hey, this isn't as awful as we may paint it to be if we're in the camp of this is terrible.
Well, and then one thing real quick. We also looked at just last year using
Right.
this. I mean, we haven't looked at all of the other cuts to see if there would be, I mean, like, what if we were looking at the 2019 games and now adjusting those cuts and those changes? Like, what would it
And
have
to
done?
be
You know what
fair,
I mean?
this is a look back. We're using athletes' performances that they had no idea of these cuts coming. We're
That's what I was about
putting
to
in a
say.
lot of assumptions here. Well, and especially when we do the reverse order.
Right.
We had a lot of
Yeah.
caveats. This is the for shits one, right? That's coming up. This one was a bit more of a depiction of what could have happened. This one is like, we took some liberties here on the next one. But I thought it was fun to do.
No, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Mike,
I
just
have to do it.
because you're the guy that plays with all the numbers and you saw what this last year did, what would you think would be some of the finishes of past years with the cuts? Do you think it would be similar to this, or do you think it would be completely different based on when they did the cuts in those other years? Like if we look at 2011 or 20 any of those years, do you think it would be different?
I'd really like to look at 2018 because it was the last one where they didn't do cuts and see. I mean, again, like the things that come to mind first is like Matt still wins and like a few other things. But then there's the year that I think this was brought up by somebody else, Tia and Kara, where they were like points apart.
Right.
And Tia won. Like if there was cuts or different scoring systems, so I mean we've mentioned a few of those, or the order of the events are different. Therefore, the execution or the feeling of those athletes about what they have to do in that moment, knowing that, hey, there's still this sandbag event or something else coming, then that all can factor in. But I mean, just this look back, and as Chase said, we don't have a time machine. We're not actually going back and telling these athletes like, hey, by the way, you're going to get cut tomorrow if you don't lift the sandbag. Or in that case, what was the other one? If you don't do this echo press event, right, you're going to get cut. So I think they would have probably pushed a little differently there. But yeah, 2018 could be a little bit different, especially with maybe podium, maybe top 10. The year of Tia and Kara, just how close that was. That's one that I definitely want to look at. This took a little while. So it's not something where I just plug myself into the computer and then can tell you like, hey, in 2011, it would have been this, this, and this. But I wish, but maybe with AI, I can get there.
AI solves everything until it becomes our biggest problem.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do the fun one, and I'll set this up as I was talking to Mike. I was like, hey, what can you go back and run these cut numbers with the field last year? He's like, sure, no problem. I was like, all right, I got a worse one for you. Can you, for the sake of displaying how event order can dictate the competition with cuts, without cuts, not really. I mean, depending on like your fatigue level going into certain weekends, but I was like, can you run these numbers in reverse order of events? So instead of going event 1 on Thursday, we are starting with Sunday as Jackie Pro being event 1 and Back 9 being event 2 and Alpaca being event 3. And then we're going to do a cut to 30 based off the end of, let's say, or I would say the beginning of Saturday, right? Saturday, 2 days, cut to 30, and then 1 day, cut to 20. If everybody's following us. So it's the same format. We're just going in.
If you're following that.
Reverse order
bravo.
events, same time for the cuts. Now, we'll say this is that the problem with this, right off the bat, is that we don't have the numbers for the first 10 athletes that got cut initially to start the test, right? Did we just take them off the board completely? How did you factor them in?
Yeah, I just chopped them out. So it's out of 30. And but just to be clear, the scoring is out of 30 then as well.
Yeah.
So it's using a scoring that matches the amount of athletes, and then but it is in a reverse order because obviously again, no time machine. We can't make up 10 athletes not doing an event.
So there's a big hole in this experiment, but it's still.
That's what makes this the fun one.
So I'll say this. Here are the 10 athletes that aren't a part of this test because they got cut in the beginning of the weekend, and we're using them in this 10. Andre Uday, Baden Brown, Austin Spencer, Moritz Fiebig, Tudor Magda, Cole Grisaber, Austin Rakelme, Yorgos Karavis, Keelan Henry, and Arthur Siminoff. Those are the 10 athletes or 9 athletes, however many this was at the time, that are not making it forward. But I added another level of complexity because I was like, but Mike, what if we did this? How can we show the end of day standings at the end of each day and watch how their placements progress going forward? And thankfully he said yes.
Dude.
So this one that you're on right now is actually the correct order. Sorry, there's so many tabs that we went back and forth on. So you want the reverse. Yeah, that one. But men's is
This says 22 men with 23 cuts and scoring day-by-day summary.
There should be a 22 men, 30 and reverse day summary.
22 men, 30 and reverse day summary. How's that?
There we go. There.
All right. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
End of day 1, which is Sunday's events. Just in your top 3, Roman Karenikov would have been in first place at the end of day 1. And Sam Quant and Justin Medeiros would be tied at the end of day 1. So that's your podium, with 4th place being Guy Majeros, 5th place being Jeffrey Adler, 6 Pat Vellner, 7 Willie George, because he had a great first day or Sunday, 8 Jason Hopper, 9 BKG, 10 Lazar Jukic. That's the end of day 1.
Ricky Garrard, 12th.
Ricky Garrard in 12th place.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so this is that drama, and I mean, a lot of us just watched the documentary. This is that drama that they build in, is like who's where at the end of each day. So I'm really glad you called this out, and I got to do this. Is that is a big piece of the story, is who's wearing that leader's jersey, which is why it's red there, and then who's in podium contention, and what do the scorings look like? Because you're going to keep going, but like you can already see on the screen here, Justin, after the first day, is in first. There is no drama. It looks almost like it comes close a few times, but it is similar to other previous champions. It is just that he's winning. Like he's staying in first. He never leaves first the rest of the way. But then you see these jockeying pieces where just look at day 2 there. Guy's in second.
Yes.
Like
Guy goes.
Do you remember? I mean, Guy's not in the documentary.
Right.
So in this upside down world that we're in here, it's a lot more, a lot different stories than we got out of the actual.
All right. So we moved to day 2. And I should pull up the events for this. What were the events for Saturday? I think we had 5 days of competition.
I can tell you.
I got it here. All right. Day 2, in reverse order: sandbag ladder, hat trick, rinse and repeat. At the end of this day.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Oops, that's not the tab I wanted. That's the one I'm looking at. All right, at the end of this day, Justin Medeiros in first place. Guy Majeros has moved into second place. Roman Karenikov has dropped to 3rd. Ricky Garrard has moved up to 9th. 4th place, Jason Hopper. 5th place is not even up here. Where is it? Did I miss it?
It's
Sam Quant.
Oh, yeah. Sam Quant. 6th place, Jeffrey Adler. Pat Vellner in 7th. In 8th place, Brent Fikowski. And in 10th place, Nick Matthew. So that's the wild range of things we've seen at the end of day 2. Now, at the end of day 2, is this when we cut to 30, technically, but we only started with 30. Right?
It would have been. Yeah.
All right, day 3 events. Day 3 events were Echo Press, Up and Over, and Capital.
As you could tell, because you mentioned the previous day. Imagine starting your day with a heavy max sandbag event, and then ending your day with a swim and ski event, and then going into this one. Imagine starting your day like with just a full throttle Echo Press, and then having to do a run to the Capitol and
Yeah, imagine ending with
So I mean,
capital.
there is magic to what Dave and Boz and all them do here.
What I like here too is we're also acknowledging the beauty of putting events together in the order of which they do.
Yes.
Right. If we flip this day, you're like, what the what piece of shit programming day is this? And so I want to reflect like the positive of this as well. So, okay, so let's look at the top 10 men or the top 20, technically top 30. At the end of day 3, Justin Medeiros still in first. Roman Karenikov has moved up to second. Sam Quant has moved up to third. Guillermo Harris, fourth. Jason Hopper, fifth. Adler, sixth. Vellner, seventh. Gerard, eighth. So now Gerard has moved up another spot. BKG, ninth. And Brent Fikowski in 10th. Let's go to day 4, which is technically just what? One event.
Day 4 was the makeup day, yeah.
And day 4, so we have basically one event till we cut to 20. Shuttle
And this is the
overhead event. That's the event. So after this, we're cutting down to 20. All right, and these are results for day 4. Justin Medeiros still in first. Roman Karenikov still in second. Ricky Gerard has went from 8th to 4th. Sam Quant is still in third. Patrick Vellner has moved up to 5th. Adler has dropped down to 7th. Guy has dropped down to 6th. Hopper has gone from 5th to 10th. BKG has moved up from 9th to 8th. Lazar Jukic 12th to 9th. And those are your top 10 at the end of that final shuttle overhead cut.
And then if you want to scroll down, you can see like who would have gotten cut out.
And yeah, so this is
this side, and it's the same athletes.
Right. Yep. So here's who's getting cut after this: Uldis Upanix, Spencer Panchek, Tim Paulson, Alex Vigneault, Jan Briant, Will Morad, Henrik Kampalainen, Jay Crouch, Alexander Caron, and Enrico Zanoni. Those who are the ones that got cut going into the final day. Okay, final day's events. In reverse order, Elizabeth elevated to start the day off into a skill speed medley. Could you imagine if they made this the second event?
Oh. That's the like penultimate event. Yeah, I know what you mean. It was just
what is this?
How frustrating that is.
Although in
we want real CrossFit on
what
Sunday.
happened to Tia? You're like, oh my gosh, I got cut. Can anyone beat her? And then you finish off with bike to work. So those are your 3.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah,
that's your final. It's just a bike race.
Bike to work. And
multiple athletes.
And everyone's riding off the course. They're riding. Hey, I'm in Ohio right now. I don't know. Where did I turn? Exactly. I don't understand.
All right. And so here's how it ends up. Justin Medeiros, first place. Roman Karenikov keeps his second place. Ricky Gerard gets on top of the podium, jumping from 4th to 3rd. Quant drops from 3rd to 4th. Adler goes from 7th to 5th. Vellner goes from 5th down to 6th. Hopper goes from 10th up to 7th. Guillermo Harris drops from 6th to 8th. Lazar Jukic holds on to 9th place, and BKG drops from 8th to 10th. Those are your top 10 if we went in reverse order.
I feel like we just watched a whole brand new episode, dude.
Yeah.
Like those numbers are awesome.
Like I said, yeah. Imagine this documentary of just like these athletes.
We're just going to the CrossFit Games again.
Man.
In reverse order. So,
wow.
Yeah, that was
that was a lot.
That was a lot. When we look at, I'll go back to the beginning here. And this is the original rank on the left. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we cut it through, when we went in reverse, again, the top 10 athletes are the same, just different orders. 1st through 7th is the same 1st through 7th. 8th, Guillermo Harris, where he ended up 10th in the original. Lazar Jukic is in 9th when he was 8th. BKG dropped to 10th when he was 9th. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 are the same. Travis Mayer goes from 18th to 17th, and he switches with Willie George, who is 17th to 18th. Dallin Pepper, 19, 19. But the big one is Andre Uday, who originally finished 27th, but in this format, again, not having all 1040 to start, would have been in the top 20. Is that the biggest?
Yeah, and that's where he's
had?
helped is the scoring change and then 10 less athletes, so it's like scrunches down
Where like you probably had
they
4
could
finishes
finish.
on the first day, but without those other 10, it doesn't hurt them as much.
All the middling in there of those athletes. Yeah. But I think this one really is focused on the story side of things and just driving home that piece of it matters. Well, especially even within a day, it matters. When we started saying like sandbag versus before a swim, like it really matters, the drama of the entire test, of the games, even the days that these are done in a certain order. And that's a big part of the programming that you don't necessarily always stick to. It's a lot of like, well, are they doing couplets or triplets? Are they doing chippers? They're doing all this different stuff. But it's also like what order they do it in, and then to this conversation, where those cuts happen. Like if it was shuttle to overhead, and then the cuts after that. But it's an event where you had athletes, I think Oldest Upanix, where he was just like, well, I'm not even going to try on the run. I'm just going to drive. Or was it backwards? No, he was the one that ran super fast. And didn't try overhead. Yeah.
So when you look at this, the big one I see when you talk, the fun part of this, Excel spreadsheet run is you talk about story time. Would this have changed people's feelings of Ricky Garrard if it had gone this way? Would you have been more engaged and supportive of Ricky Garrard's performance at the CrossFit Games if after day 1 he was 12th and you're like, yep, all right, he made it, he's really not here, and then it was like
exactly what we thought after 5 years. He's just kind of
because he's coming out, and what is he doing? He's coming out and like days like, oh, he wins the cap, and I was like, oh shit, here he comes. And then it's like, and then on the last day of competition, what does he go out and do? He's like, does he have 2 event wins on the first day or something like that? Comes out and wins the last event to make it on the podium. That's the thing, going into the last event of this hypothetical thing. He would have been in 4th place going into the last event, and he would have had to win it to make the podium.
Like crazy.
And with all the drama, because remember at the end of that event, when Spencer Panchik and Lazar Dukic pulled off first, and we thought Yonikoski was winning, and all of a sudden Ricky Garrard was out there, everybody thought Ricky Garrard cheated too.
They just assumed it was like, well, he's 5 seconds behind him. He must have.
In the like, you talk about drama. If we had to spend 2 hours to figure out, right? Because that's what we had to do. I mean, I remember in the truck, like CSI analyzing different video feeds to find Ricky Garrard, and I found him. And then we did this whole thing that kind of got botched on the broadcast. I was a little pissed off about that, but to find that it actually worked, like that it was actually real, and then he actually did it. And it turns out this dude comes out and podiums on the last event of the weekend. Again, fun.
That would have been rough.
Fun for nothing conversation, but
crown a champion 6 hours later after everybody watched 6 hours of video to figure out who was who. Yeah.
Well, it definitely puts a different emphasis on what those athletes did on each day. So now you're not only just, we know what they did originally, and it wasn't even how did they finish that particular day, but it's just like, the running leaderboard as it was. But this way it actually goes, oh, this is where you really were on that day, where it takes that day alone. It's like, how did you place on that day? So you really see that, like, yeah, Ricky did not have a good last day for reals, like in the real games. In this version, he had a spectacular last day. So that was really interesting. That's crazy.
And the documentary was really interesting, and it was interesting to have Pat be the one they kind of focused on, because obviously the history there. But like, there was this odd piece that I just didn't realize was happening live there, that people were like booing the fact that Ricky was in the leader's jersey for like the first couple days. Like it was like I wasn't like thinking that part. Like I was like, oh, he's back and he's doing really well. This is amazing. But like if you would have seen it this way, in this dramatic way of like, oh no, he's still hanging in. Oh no, he's still creeping up. He's still doing those things. And if you switch over to the women, because that's Laura's story at the games, is like she was just sort of hanging around. She was never really in the leader's jersey. She just sort of hung in there, and then finally got on the podium. So
all right, well, let's
you'll see that looks a little different when you pull it out. Yeah.
So we'll do the same thing for the women. Again, caveat, we're missing 10 going in because we're going backwards and we didn't have 10 to finish the weekend. But let's look at the events that we'll be starting with. So 5 days of competition because of that rain day. You've got Jackie Pro into the back 9, into the modified alpaca with the sled pushes, and kettlebell clean and jerks. These are the 10. Do we have the 10?
That should be right. Yeah.
You're let me do.
You're on the right one.
I'm on the right one. Yeah. I was going to see which ones are not in there.
It should be those.
Let's see.
Yeah, it should be those ones right there.
Is that the? Well, this is all 30. I was going to say which 10 women are not.
Oh, not in there at all.
I'll say it. There you go. No, wait, that's the women. That's the men. Come on, Chase. I'll get there. There we go. Okay. This is the bottom 10?
It should be. It's not a. But yeah, those should be the athletes that are cut.
Okay.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Athletes that won't be in this model: Kristen Kohlenbrander, Sung-Yun Choi, Caroline Connors, Freya Moosberger, Julia Cato, Elena Karatala, Sydney Mikulishin, Solveig Sigurdardottir, Michelle Morand, and Emily Rolfe. So those are the 10 that won't be in the fun V, as we like to say. Reverse order, day summary. I got that right? Okay.
Yeah.
End of day 1. Tia Toomey is sitting in 4th place. Laura Horvath is in 1st. Gabby McGawa is in 2nd. Cara Saunders is in 3rd. Oh my gosh. 4th place. Do I gotta go down here? No. 4th place.
Where's
4th place is Tia Toomey. Already said that. Yeah. 5th place, Danny Spiegel. 6th place, Karin Freyova. 7th place, Brooke Wells. 8th place, Mal O'Brien. 9th place, Ellie Turner. 10th place, Emma McQuaid. That's your top 10. Here's who's in the bottom 20. Haley Adams, 20th. Emma Lawson, 23rd. And what was it? Chrissy O'Connell, 27th. Like those are the big outside ones in this reverse made-up world order. Emma Lawson won. Shocking. Not necessarily surprising.
Yeah, I mean, she's in the leader's jersey for like a big piece of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's your end of day 1. Let's go to the events for day 2. We said sandbag ladder, hat trick, which was the sprint, wall ball shots, and dumbbell snatches for 3 sets. And then rinse and repeat, which is the swim and the ski erg there. So end of day 2, Laura Horvath is still in 1st place. Cara Saunders has moved from 3rd to 2nd. I forgot she was there, honestly. No disrespect. Tia has moved from 4th to 3rd. 4th place, Danny Spiegel has moved from 5th to 4th. Ellie Turner has moved from 9th to 5th. Gabby McGawa's dropped from 2nd to 6th. Brooke Wells stays in 7th. Amanda Barnhart has moved from 12th to 8th. Karin Freyova has dropped from 6th down to 9th. And Mal O'Brien has dropped from 8th to 10th after the 2nd day in this reverse order of events.
So again, where's the teens at?
Right.
Is because they're a big part of the actual storyline. These, and you could say it a few different ways. Because I heard Pat say this, I think, on a podcast recently. It's like there's these athletes that have been there enough times, and thinking about the real order, not this reverse order. They've been there enough times to know, like, hey, I still got Saturday and Sunday. Hey, I'm still, and that does factor into those cuts conversation. hey, I still got Saturday and Sunday, and they know how to turn it on and say like, okay, this is where I'm going to go win or podium or whatever that might be. Like in the actual version, the teens are the ones that are winning the early days. In this version, it's Tia's actually, she's going to jump. I mean, she's going to jump straight up up here and stay there, similar to Justin. Laura, who's obviously been on the podium a few times now, is in there at first, and then Cara Saunders, who was unfortunately you didn't know she was there. You forgot she was there. Just kidding. But she's in second. It's like there's a huge gap, and it sort of, this shows well is like these are the athletes that they know how to win on Saturday and Sunday, and so that's what you're seeing here. And the newer athletes to it are the ones that are still are the ones that sort of have pulled back a little bit when they get into the weekend.
Well, and I wonder if it's a pullback thing, or if it's a, do you really know what it feels like to go 5 days of battling head to head with the best in the world? You know, you can't, obviously Emma Lawson's amazing. All the teen athletes we have out there are they're just, you can't even put enough like how badass they are to them. But also, like, there is an experience level of how do you know what it feels like to go every single day, 5 days straight, where you're having to do battle, not just come out and be like, I'm here, boom, and I'm going to go big, and I'm big for 2 days or even 3 days, since that's what normally like the semis are, or, you know, the sanctionals before that, or whatever. And that's a long haul. And that's one of the things that isn't always talked about at the games is the other event is the games, like lasting at that high level.
They say like
the entire time.
Overall event is the entire test itself.
Right. And so that's why I think with a lot of these younger athletes, I don't think it's that they physically can't handle it, but I mean, there's got to be a mental element to it where it's like, I mean, they're beasts, but like, you know, in like the old school world of wrestling, we talk about old man strength. The old man doesn't have to be the best athlete. They'll just come out and they'll beat you because they know how to beat you, not that they're better than you. And I think that it's something like this where you actually see, you're like, wow, 23rd for Emma Lawson on the last day. Damn. I would have never saw that. I never thought that. It's crazy. That's cool to see this.
All right, let's day 3, echo press, up and over, ring muscle ups, jump over an object, 35 GHG sit-ups, and the walking lunge to the end, and then the capital. So at the end of day 3, Tia has moved from 3rd to 1st. Laura has dropped from 1st to 2nd. Cara Saunders has dropped from 2nd to 3rd, which is wild. It's like if you looked at 3 straight days, like basically the back half of the weekend, Cara had a podium performance all the way on the back half. Let's see. Mal O'Brien has jumped from 10th to 4th. Danny Spiegel has dropped from 4th to 5th. Brooke Wells has jumped from 7th to 8th, or 7th to 6th. Lucy Campbell went from 16th to 7th on this day. In reverse.
Right.
Danielle Brandon, 12th to 8th. And then Gabby Magala dropped from 6th to 9th, and Alexis Raptis jumped from 15th to 9th to tie at the end of the day for 9th place with Gabby Magala.
And Tia jumped from 3rd to 1st, getting 288 points.
Jeez.
In one day.
One day.
One day. She did it in the actual order too. It's just laid out a little bit differently. Right. So, but yeah, she had a big day 3 to just solidify that she's still got it. She can stick around.
Dang. And then we still have 30 to this point. And okay, so let's go to the day 4.
Moving day.
Cut day. Shoulder to overhead is the only event that we have. Again, that event here. So let's look at what happens at the end of day 4 as we cut down to 20. Tia Toomey still in first to first. Laura Horvath maintains her second and second. Mal O'Brien moves from fourth to third. Cara Saunders drops from third to fourth. Daniel Brandon jumps from eighth to fifth. Danny Spiegel drops from fifth to sixth. Brooke Wells drops from sixth to seventh. Alexis Raptis moves up from ninth to eighth. Ariel Lowen jumps from 16th to 9th. And Amanda Barnhart goes from 12th to 10th. So big jump from, say, Ariel Lowen, right? She jumps, 7 spots in one event.
Wow.
It's pretty wild. Emma Lawson, notables, 15th to 11th going into that. Let's see. Lucy Campbell went from 7th to 18th just on that one test or one event. So that was a tough one for her going into that. Now, there was a good question here. Let me pull it up. Is if we looked at it in the order of which it was originally designed, be curious about that. So instead of a 5-day cut, it's a 4-day cut. So
yeah, I gotcha.
You put the shuttle run into the first day. What that?
Yeah, because even if you go to the leaderboard right now, no, the leaderboard's right. I think there's a way I pulled it that it told me like the order they were supposed to be, and I actually had to go and switch it when I was pulling this because I believe what was it supposed to be? Wasn't it supposed to be shuttle overhead was on day one, and then
day 2 is supposed to be, I think, a full rest day.
Full rest day, and then they had
But I don't know. So, good question.
More to do. Yeah.
Good question. We're just going to stop this podcast, and Mike's going to do some math, and we'll do it all over again. I'm just kidding. Okay, last day of competition, which was the original first day of competition. Elizabeth elevated, skill speed medley, and bike to work. And everybody loses their mind in the order of the program at which it is in reverse because of what happens here. End of the weekend. Tia still in first. Mal O'Brien goes from third to second. Laura Horvath goes from second to third. Daniel Brandon goes from fifth to fourth. Brooke Wells, 7th to 5th. Emma Lawson, 11th up to 5th. Tied for 5th place with Daniel Brandon.
This doesn't do tiebreakers, so there would be some sort of something, but yeah.
And Cara Saunders drops from 4th to 7th. Haley Adams goes from 13th to 8th, so a 5-place jump there. Gabby Magawa goes from 12th to 9th. Alexis Raptis goes from 8th to 10th. Notables that were in the top 10 that got bumped out on this last day. Ariel Lowen was 9th. She ended up 11th. Amanda Barnhart was 10th. She ended up in 13th. And Danny Spiegel went from 6th to 17th on one day. The first day alone.
It's a rough day.
It's a rough day.
Rough day with a 20 person scoring system that doesn't award hardly anything for getting like teens. That's who I was thinking of when you mentioned that earlier in the show. Is like, what if somebody was getting the teens? Like they're not getting any points down there.
And I want to say, I think different from the men's side, the storyline in this one is less. Other than like mid-tier ones having big drops.
Yeah. And if you're just focused on these 3 athletes, like sort of the documentary, these 3 athletes are going to do well. Like the thing that you would sort of latch on to is where's Mal O'Brien to start the weekend? Like she's not even, I mean, she was within the top 10, I believe, and stayed there, but like she wasn't there. And that versus what this would be is Laura's here, like as John Singleton likes to say, Europe is coming. And she's actually here, and then her just have a slight decline over there versus what actually is the true story is she starts way low and she skyrockets up, sort of what we saw with Ricky in the reverse order.
Yeah. No, you're right. Like Laura, 2 straight days of wearing a leader jersey in reverse. On the third day where Tia just has a monster day, she's only behind her by 35 points.
Crazy.
And we're like, oh, maybe she can hang. And then she, gets a little
turns into 50.
Yeah, turns into 50. And then you see the event on the last day. You're like, oh, it's the fucking over.
Still got it. Yeah.
But yeah, so like but no, I'll take that back. Like Emma Lawson, 23rd, right? Like, yep, there's the young, inexperienced, 23rd place, 20th, and just like 15th, 11th, 5th, right?
Yeah.
Amanda, Daniel Brandon, 15th to 4th or tied for.
Yeah.
That's a big move for her.
Like you can even see like
Lily Adams, that's a big day. And on the flip side is that those that were like Danny Spiegel, 5th, 4th, 5th, 6th for 4 straight days. Like, oh shit, someone who has barely been able to finish a CrossFit Games is going to finish in the top 5. Like, no.
Put her on a bike. Yeah. And
some of that volatility has to do with the programming. And if you don't have all your holes, filled and all your boxes checked, that's part of the picture we wanted to paint when running this model, is that not only does the programming matter when you take the cuts, and we'll keep saying it over and over, but where you put the events specifically also do matter when it comes to either how the weekend unfolds for, I would say, those mid-tier athletes, where the programming does matter. The top of the top, Bill, we've said this before, is like, it didn't matter what was programmed for Tia, Matt, and Rich.
No.
It didn't matter. That doesn't mean the programming doesn't matter. They just didn't matter for them. Like, whatever you did and whatever order and whatever scoring system you used, they were always the best by far. Those are exceptions. Right? But how it happens from podium athletes, that's a big deal. And how the top 20 shake out going in through cuts, that matters.
Well, then I think the other thing, as we come around to the end here, knowing that all of these things are supposed to be helping us to find who the fittest athlete in the world is. But at the same time, with CrossFit, the company of CrossFit, wanting to make this a more world-known sport, and we want to get it to all. We want 30 million people doing CrossFit, and all these things where we want to make it much more spectator-friendly. Where you put the cuts, or even if you put the cuts, then become part of that game, because it's not just about the fittest. That's who we're crowning, but it's about the spectacle of the competition as well. And I don't know. My question, I guess, to you guys would be: what do you think it does more for the spectacle of the sport to have less people? Or, I mean, because like, if let's say that my camp of people is watching number 25, and I'm all about 25, and then they're not there anymore because they've been cut. I'm like, well, cool. I might watch it. Maybe I'll watch the rerun of it.
That's a great question.
I mean, I think it's only 40 athletes. It's only 40.
I don't like manufactured drama. As a fan.
Right.
I think there's plenty of drama and stories to tell that can always come out. You can't tell me that 2015 to 2018 didn't have great storylines other than Matt and Tia running away with it eventually.
Totally.
But we still had the battles between Katchen and Tia and Cara when, that was growing up. We still had the battles of Matt and Ben in 2015. And then, Matt just went fucking off planet for a while. But the baseline races of podium races, the Brent Fikowski and Lucas Hogberg ties, and like, there was plenty of drama outside of those who were just winning. There's plenty of nerves and excitement when it came to all of that, I thought, especially for those battles for a podium position. But beyond that, I think those things can still happen, but these cuts add more drama lower down the leaderboard. But yet at the same time, it's like I said, it's somewhat manufactured.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever you take the container that's this big and now you squeeze it down, you are going to have.
Sport watcher, are you? Are you someone like, I know you're a big purist sport watcher. Like, the athletes, the drama of the moment I can get into. I don't need extra drama. And some people are just casual laissez-faire fans. Like, no, I want cuts because I want to see these storylines come in every other day, and that, like, they enjoy that manufactured drama.
Yeah. And on that, like I'm not a big basketball watcher, but I'll watch March Madness and I'll watch the NBA Finals because in those cases, those games truly matter for finding the champion. Like I'm not going to watch the season for the Lakers or any other team or the Dallas Mavericks. But I'll watch them in the finals. Yeah. I'll watch them in the finals because it's that sort of thing. Like, we've whittled it down through a bracket or whatever it might be. Those teams are playing. They're actually playing for the championship. So that's like the final heat. That's the final 10 men and the final 10 women. And that's where we see, like, regardless of cuts, like, I think it came up somewhere as like, well, the fans are taking a pee probably in those first 2 heats. They're not really seeing some of them anyway, unless you're a big fan of the 25th or 35th athlete, and you're like, oh no, I'm only here. I'm so and so's parents, and I'm only here to see my guy or my girl do as well as she or he can in this event. And then once they get cut, I'll be back in the RV park or somewhere. So I think there's a piece of that where it's like, it's manufactured drama to an extent. And then there's also just like, well, there could be surprises. There could be, and then like there's athletes that for sure show up and nobody thought they should be where they are, or put them on any ranking that says that. Brian's pretty good, but he does have some outliers every now and then that is just people he didn't think of, that are just doing something that you didn't think, and then all of a sudden they're in this final heat, and that is where some of this starts to matter, is like, those are the names that we now know. So if you're trying to grow the sport to a place where there's more notable names, you need to get those names in front of eyeballs, where people can actually see them. And the same goes for how to support them, is like a big piece of that too. Like, if they're not on the field competing, nobody's really paying attention
No one knows
to what
who they are,
shoe deal they have, or what protein they take. Yeah.
Well, and I think our sport is different because it's not the 100-yard dash at the Olympics where you run your prelims to get through, and you get cut if you don't have the fast enough time, and you don't get to play in the final heat, but that's because you weren't fast enough to make it. That was on one thing. We have 15 things. So I might not be good or as good as these other guys in 5 of them and not make the cut. But all of those other ones after that, if you would have done the get with the programming flip upside down world, I would have been great, because I would have just had a bad ending and maybe I would have been, towards the podium. And I think that those are, and again, I understand logistics. I understand reasons for it. I understand why it's used at times, or at least my opinions of why I think it's being put in there. I just think if we are trying to grow the sport itself, then you're right. You need more champions than just 6, 3 guys and 3 girls. And we have the 40 fittest men and women. These are our champions. And under the definition of our CrossFit definition of fitness, these are our people, and we end up cutting them out before they even get to do anything.
Yeah.
And if nothing about the main broadcast story, which, yes, I know it has to be about the race itself. I get it. But then all of the footage that can be done, whether it's, and I need to say it because if Sevon thinks that I don't want him to do the behind the scenes, whatever, that's not the case. He or whoever or whatever group does it. I mean, there's a lot of social media and awareness and oohs and ahs that we're allowed to give to these, 80 individuals that are seriously the tip of our spear that need to be talked about. Because, in our sport, there's 40 that make it, but no one talks about 40. They talk about 10. That's it.
Yeah.
So I think if we want to grow it, don't limit our group. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and I love that part. I want to. Well, there is a Colton Mertens documentary coming.
Oh, that's right.
I saw a preview for it. So, like, I love that there's more, like like the Road to the Games and Miles to Madison and all those different documentaries that CrossFit or CrossFit Broadcasting put out, those are great. I still want to see 15th through 40th athletes, because like the Abby Dommett story, or the or I'm just reading some of the comments. Nick Matthews, behind the scenes of him after that after the crossover event, something like that. Like, I understand there's only so many storylines, there's only so many budgets, there's only so many things to do these documentaries. Like, still, if there's somebody with a camera crew that's following some of those athletes around before they get there, at the semifinals, at the games, as best they can, like, that would really help this out to then add to it, versus where I think we get a little like defensive is like, I'm only going to see this athlete 15 times, maybe, but you're selling me that I might only see them 10 times.
Right.
And that's the piece where it starts to get like, hey, that's the athlete from my affiliate. That's the athlete from my hometown that I'm only going to get to see like 10 times, and then I won't be able to again. Where it's like, well, I'd love to get more stories out of Saban or others that say like, okay, well, we actually know a good bit about that, where we don't just have to wait once a year and hope that they're there and hope they get the show out exactly where they show out.
Yeah. Well, hey, that's the conversation we circle around until we get to the games, and we can have another conversation about what happens when the cuts are in place with the scoring system they have and the programming that we have yet to see. But that I'm excited to see. And obviously, this doesn't take away from any excitement I have about the CrossFit Games coming up. This is the favorite time every year of that week in Madison, Wisconsin. But I think overall points that we have is like there's a personal feeling on certain things, and there's a professional understanding on the flip side. I don't know where all you guys fall. Personally, for me, I love seeing a full field of 40. I love everybody taking the test. I enjoy that part of it because I just get to see everyone against everyone the whole weekend long. Because I love seeing more people doing all this stuff. On the professional objective side, if this is what's best for whatever situation or scenario that they are working within, fine. Just make sure the cuts are the appropriate time with the right programming to determine if this cut was appropriate when it was done. Other than that, I don't really have an opinion beyond that.
Yeah, I know. I agree with that. I'm a fan of, they all made it there. They already made their cuts. Let them all hash it out. I love seeing those outliers in the first heat that somehow get the score that is able to hold up into the top 5 at the games level, to where they can say, as an athlete, I mean, I know we're not trying to cater to number 28 or 30, whatever, but there's a lot of pride that goes into these athletes and something like that. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, we talked about where it needs to be if you're going to have cuts there, and it has to be not just thought about, but really thought about. You have to look at all the different avenues of the why you're putting it in there, when you're putting it in there, what things have you already tested to make sure that it's at the appropriate place. And me personally, if you're going to make cuts, then you better have something really fucking cool on the other end of that cut. Like, I want to see big toys and big equipment and crazy shit that's going to be a logistical nightmare for 40, so that 10 people can really do some crazy stuff.
Give me that giant Rogue roller coaster.
Right.
Just off to the side.
We
only got so many room. We only got 5 roller coasters, so we got to whittle this down. Yeah.
That's funny. That would be pretty fun. That'd be a cool team event. It's like, all right, put all your teammates in there. Dump them out the other side. Yeah. So, okay. So before we close out, I think the biggest thing I am going to be looking at, obviously we talked about, is like the right program at the right time. I think 2 days of programming, you can, done correctly, very doable. 5 to 6, maybe 7 scores to cut 10 people. The biggest day with the most pressure is going to be day 3. Can you look at whatever events, however many they're going to be and what they are on that one day of competition that is going to cut 10 more people? I guess my last question to both of you, Michael, I'll start with you, is that, do you think the programming prior to that cut should also be in play of judging whether the programming is appropriate for the next cut? Or should that day almost be its own isolated full test of fitness to cut another 10?
Oh,
yeah. Like, are we going to judge?
I think it sort of resets
10
and says like, okay,
for those 3 to 4.
I mean, if the first day the first cut doesn't go well, and it was just like a swim event, and then, well, which does happen multiple years. Like if you get these certain events that are just very leaning towards specialists, then yeah, I think it starts to then impact how you sort of diagnose the rest. But if you got a full test of fitness through the first 3 days, if we're saying that, then I think you can do a little bit of a reset to say, okay, we've whittled it down. We've taken 10 people out. Now we're gonna 2019. Now we're gonna lift heavy. No, is what I was thinking. But now we're gonna sort of start over, whittle it down 10 more places with another day of fitness, and then
like
we're really gonna put them through the Atalanta and all of the other crazy things on the last day, and we have to build towards this last day where it's only 20 athletes. Yeah.
See, I think that each of those, the programming before the cut has to be programmed to the definition of what we're trying to look at as fitness. Yeah. So you have to be able to hit all the things you need to hit, because if you left something out and that person gets cut from that, then you don't have the fittest going. You have someone that's okay but doesn't have this one thing. I think that first cut, it should be, I don't think there should be any specialist anything before the cuts, any of it. It should be very CrossFit-y to get through those cuts, because we're trying to find the fittest athletes to get. Now, once you get your 10, if that's what they're winning 10 to 20, right?
Yes.
40, 30, 20. Once you get to your 20, okay, now you can put your specialist stuff in there if you want. But I think prior to that, your cuts have to be, and I mean, this is an odd word, but pure CrossFit, where I think it has to, because otherwise
balanced.
It has to be balanced.
I mean, like, what if you had a specialist event in a monostructure modality, gymnastics modality, weightlifting modality? Like, what if there was balance there too?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, like something that's not like who lifts the heaviest?
Yeah.
And who can do the most? Yeah, who's going to do the most ring muscle ups with unbroken? Like we're talking like outlier specialist things. If there's a running and lifting, fine. If there's a swimming and some lifting and a swimming and gymnastics, okay, cool. Those things. Now, granted, if you're looking at 6 or 7 scored events before your first cut, that's going to be way easier to have a balanced test up to that cut versus one day where you're going to have 3 events.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, okay, you need to be very particular that you, just like what you said, Chase, that is the most important day, because you have the least amount of tests, least amount of events to cut to your final 20.
Right.
And that has to be balanced. I think that the only way it wouldn't be is if each one of those three events were like one-off. You have pure strength, you have a pure endurance, and you have a pure gymnastic.
Okay, so let me fine-tune the question just a little bit. Give you guys a couple minutes. The cut to 20, so say we look back at last year, right? The cut to 20 would have been, so we would have cut to 30 after bike to work, speed skill medley, Elizabeth elevated, shuttled overhead, capital, up and over, and echo press. You think you can cut 10 people after that, which is what we did.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. The next day, rinse and repeat, hat trick, sandbag ladder. Are you comfortable cutting 10 more off those 3 events?
Okay, so rinse and repeat, you would have
swim, ski, right? Integral test. It just was a skier test, really.
Right.
You have your sprint, wall balls, and dumbbell snatches, and if you got a no rep or not. And then
tall guy, no rep event.
And then you have your strength event.
And then a strength event.
Now, granted,
actually,
what I'm saying is, like, are you going to add the other events to the judgment of that last 20 cut, or are you looking at only that day? Does that last day need to be balanced on its own, or is it okay to look at the back 7 or 8 events to say, is like, yeah, I know this day was a little bit not the best isolated test to cut 10 more people, but you guys already did all these other things, so your points are allocated there. Or are you going to look at that day and be like,
I see what you're
this
saying.
day alone, this day alone also has to be judged as its own balanced, isolated test of fitness to cut 10 more people? Or are you going to add the other events to the totality?
No, well, you would add to the totality.
It would factor in
because
for
everybody already did those first 6 events.
I
agree. As long as they're all doing the same
thing.
thing.
You know, how would you look at it? Does it have to be the perfect 3 to 4 event test to cut 10-4 by itself, or is it okay to look at what we've already done?
You have to fill in the gaps for what you've already done.
I mean, they're already filling in the gaps. I'm just saying how people would perceive the programming.
Right. No, totally. And
I think you have to have. You got. I mean, historically Saturday, and that's been true the last minus 2020 for a lot of reasons, but like it's the max lift event,
right?
Like, or it was a clean ladder a couple years ago. So like you're
going
to have that one. So like adding then a swim on the front end of the day, and then putting a CrossFit event between it to look at last year, then
I don't think
you don't really get it. So that's factoring into my answer to your question.
So what I look at,
that's what I'm looking back on.
I look at specialist interval tests. I look at a specialist interval test, and I look at a specialist strength test. Not even a specialist strength test. That was more just right. But like I look at 2 interval tests and a sandbag lift on the 3rd day, and how my feeling would be about that being the cut programming for that day.
I think you'd have to look back at what you've done to see if it was appropriate. Yeah.
I looked at that day alone. I'm like, that wasn't good enough.
Right.
Yeah. You're saying, does that have to be a microcosm that says
exactly.
like just this day? Did I find the 10 more best, or did I like cross off 10 people off the list of like, nope, they're not. If we
looked at the cut that was the most talked about cut with the sprint, before we got into all the lifting and all the, as Pat said, all the CrossFit stuff. We didn't get to do any CrossFit stuff. If you were to look at that cut, you'd have to look at all the things prior to that cut to see, okay, well, is it appropriate? Not that it's after a sprint, but what were all the things that were done prior to the sprint? So if you look at the totality of all of the events before that, did you have an appropriate test up to that point in which you could start cutting people out? So I think with what you're saying, Chase, is I think both of them are important. I will actually circle back around to make more sense of what your question was. The first part is important because you're right. You only have 3 events to add to that to add to the other events to continue on to your 20 that are moving on. So it's that first 6 have to be important so you get the mass majority. The 10 that you cut out, plus the ones that are moving forward. Then you take your next 3 events, whatever that is, which would be whatever holes you're going to plug in. It's still important,
right?
Still, I mean, they can't just be blown off events. But does it add to the other 6 that you had?
Do you look at them isolated in programming bubbles?
Yeah, I would say I'd join them together.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, in 2019. They are basically isolated in programming bubbles because there's a cut after every single one of them.
Right.
So, like, if you just cut down to 40 from those first 2 days, because there was no way they were going to do 150 whatever athletes. Like, if you just cut down to 40 and then did all of the rest of the tests, I think 2019, well, it would obviously be a lot different. But I think a lot of our feelings now about cuts would be a lot different as well. And I think it was Hiller or somebody that said it, is like, just do the same thing every year. Like, don't do the same events, unknown and unknowable as far as the events go, but just say, like, on Friday, we're going to do this. On Saturday, we're going to do this. And that then creates a sport piece of it that is just not just a month before, but years before, okay, well, I know going in that if I'm going to go to the CrossFit Games and I'm going to compete there, it's going to be 40, 30, 20. The scoring system is going to work like this. And then they're going to then be able to cut down to these. And that then is sort of goes both ways, that the programming is then not just, well, do we have some cool programming that can only be 10 people? No, it's like, no, we're going to program for 40, 30, and 20.
Yeah.
And then you're building that I think then does help answer your question a little bit better, is there is events built for 40. There's events built for 30 and 20, which hopefully is true this year and did look to be true. What we went through all the data over the last hour and 40 minutes here is that it's still found the same people, but there's a lot of questions of like, well, if they do a max lift event and they do a swim event on the weekend, then are we left with like a lot of unknowns of like, well, is it just the guy that can lift the biggest bag and the guy that is it just Roman basically?
Yeah.
They can do all those things on the weekend. Yeah.
All right. Food for thought. Excited to see what happens.
Phew.
All right, Mike, thanks for all that stuff, man. Thanks for giving us something to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation as well. That was super fun. Glad we got to, the what if theory. Right?
You're just keeping the Marvel thing going.
Exactly.
It's a great show. Yeah.
I even did the title the same way. All right, gang. Thank you guys for joining us on a Thursday, back-to-back days this week, which was super fun. Don't forget to go check out the ogculture.com. We are games. The Standard is the Standard shirts are available for pre-sale the 13th, which is today, on Thursday through the 17th next week, and then they will be gone forever. Just like the tie-dye OG shirts that people keep asking us for. You should have got them when you had time. Should have got them when you had the chance. All right, Bill, Mike, thank you so much. You guys have a great weekend. See you next week.
You too.
Bye,
See you, Madison.